1997, a man began a conspiracy of lying that lasted for 20 years. This man's name was Dr. John Morrison, a forensic expert who was involved in more than 700 cases, but you will be surprised to know that he had no real degree. He was always ready to testify in court, and in every case presented his false reports. He earned more than $2,500 in this way. But the story was not just about money. Dr. John Morrison trapped many young girls in his false claims, and did things to them that are horrifying to imagine. Even while all this was happening, he maintained his identity in court as an expert for 20 years. You may be wondering how this could happen, but you will be even more surprised to learn that this man not only took the courts in his grip, but the whole world. What happens next? How did he deceive real experts? How many major cases did he influence? And the most dangerous question, was he doing all this only to make money, or was there another motive? If you think such things only happen in films, think again, because the biggest conspiracy yet is about to be revealed, and you will face shocking events. So without delay, let's start today's true crime story. But before starting, I request you, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. And if you like the video, please do like and comment to tell what improvements can be made in the video. In the year 1997, Donald Pichard started his own audio pharmacy company. This company examined audio evidence for the police and private detectives. His first client also came to him as an audio pharmacy investigator and private detective, who ran the Criminal and Forensic Investigation Bureau. One day Donald Pichard received a call. The caller said, "I am Dr. John Morrison from CBI Investigate, and I am from Manchester. I have an audio recording that has technical problems. Can your company fix it?" Donald Pichard was just excited to land his first forensic deal. He had no idea who this John Morrison really was. He was happy that he was going to receive his first payment. The total work was 10 hours and he was to be paid 15 per hour. The total bill came to 2050 km. Sometime later, Donald received a check for 2050 km, which was deposited into his company's account. But the real conspiracy began from here. The tone of John Morrison's conversation, his truth-sounding words, all this was meant to convince people. He took advantage of that psychological trickery. Donald thought he had landed a great client for his business, but he did not know that the man he was working for was Dr. John Morrison, aka a forensic expert, who was completely fake. Dr. John Morrison successfully convinced people for 20 years that he was not only an expert, but also a master of many forensic techniques and a private detective. But the reality was that he had no degree. Yes, nothing. Donald had no idea that he was working for a major fraudster, and the most shocking thing was that Dr. John Morrison had other real experts do the work cheaply, and then sold their reports under his name at many times the price to his clients. His method was very cunning. He hired any real expert like Donald Pichard and paid them a modest amount, and then handed the report to his client at 10 times the price. But Donald was completely unaware of this game. He was simply intent on growing his business. In that enthusiasm, he took a second, then a third project, and with the third project he finally got a chance to meet Dr. John Morrison face to face. Dr. John Morrison told Donald that he needed the material prepared to present in court by Monday morning. So Donald himself went on Sunday night to a place called Sale near Manchester to collect the documents. The meeting place was a deserted parking lot. The night darkness, cars in the parking area, and here a package exchange was happening. It felt like a scene from a thriller film. When Donald arrived, he saw a woman sitting in John Morrison's car. He got out of his car. Then both shook hands. There was no long conversation. Dr. John Morrison said, "Thank you very much. I will contact you again." Donald replied, "Okay." But the truth was that Dr. John Morrison was completely a fake man. This man was living the fantasy of CSI, crime scene investigation and detective films in the real world. And now the game was about to change. The third project had been delivered, but after this Dr. John Morrison began to delay payment to Donald. Donald and his team waited 12 to 18 months for their money. But when there was no response, they decided to write off the debt. But here a big question arises. When people fall prey to such fraudsters, why don't they go to the police? The answer is blow off. This is the psychological part of fraud, in which the victim himself assumes that he must have made some mistake, and fearing embarrassment, does not complain. Especially if the amount is not large, people think, Let it be an experience. We will be careful next time. But they do not know how many people this man might be cheating. And this is why people like John Morrison survive for years. But Dr. John Morrison's real conspiracy was not limited to earning money. It was far more dangerous than that. Donald Pichard and the real experts did not know that their work was becoming part of a fraudulent scheme. Dr. John Morrison took their real research and reports and presented them in court under his name and established his identity as a special witness in British courts. This was legally wrong because every statement given in court must be verified and certified. And that is exactly what Dr. Jean's biggest trick was this. By giving false testimony, he influenced many such cases. These were not minor cases. Serious crimes like rape, mysterious deaths, and robbery. And he treated these grave matters as if they were part of some drama. For the past 20 years, Dr. John Morrison had been deceiving the British justice system. He presented himself as a famous scientist. He claimed to have a PhD and a BSc, and that he was an international expert. He asserted that he had obtained his degree from Roseville University in America. But the truth was that no such university existed. He had simply bought fake certificates from the internet and started conning the world. His background was not that of a hard-working scientist, but of an ordinary person. John Morrison was born into a Jamaican origin family. At the age of 5, he came to the UK and did his schooling in Manchester. But he had no particular interest in studies. He never pursued higher education. So the question arises, how did the idea of becoming a forensic expert come into his mind? The story says that at 19 he read a detective novel, and at that moment decided that this was what he would do. Ironically, the person who dreamed of catching criminals became the biggest fraudster himself. In 1997, without any degree and without any training, Dr. John Morrison declared himself a forensic investigator. He bought fake degrees and built a whole business to make his false claims appear true. He advertised in the telephone directory. He published his name in the Solicitor General. He created a company called the Criminal and Forensic Investigation Bureau in Manchester. He gave his office such a professional look that people started to believe him. On the wall of Dr. John Morrison's office there was a large board that read Criminal and Forensic Investigation Bureau, and its motto was Unmasking Evil for the Defense of Good, which itself was the biggest lie. He pretended to be the guardian of truth. Not only that, he listed himself on his visiting card as the 5th Emergency Service, as if after the police, fire brigade, ambulance and Coast Guard he was the public's greatest helper. John Morrison also called himself a doctor of criminal psychology. He falsely claimed to be an expert in forensic sciences, such as blood and fingerprint analysis, polygraph testing and facial mapping. For this he set up a web of high-tech equipment, documents and fake degrees in his office. Thus his fake business in the private sector prospered without obstruction because there was no strict law there. Technically, he was not breaking any law. But the real game began when lawyers started calling him as an expert witness in criminal cases. Expert witnesses are called in UK courts, so they can understand scientific and technical aspects, and their testimony can influence the decisions of judges and juries. But when Dr. John Morrison stood in the witness box, he spoke lie after lie. In drug-related cases, drunk driving, rape, unexplained deaths, in every case his testimony was completely worthless and false. In 1997 he got an opportunity to be an expert witness in a major robbery case. The police asked him to analyze CCTV footage to see whether the suspect was involved in the crime or not. But what did this con man do? He did no work himself. He simply sent the footage to a real expert. At that time he was scamming the audio specialist Donald Pichard. Donald thought he was helping a real investigation, so he gave his full cooperation. But this was not just one case. It was the beginning of a major fraud that continued for years. So was Dr. John Morrison doing all this for money? No. For him this was not just a swindle but an obsession. Imagine when he stood on the witness stand he felt very important. He made false claims. He believed people considered him a genius investigator. He got a thrill from openly deceiving the law. And this game continued for between 2002 and 2005 the UK courts paid him £2,500 as an expert witness. That is, he paid real experts less than half the money, and kept the rest himself. Government money, the public's tax money, was going straight into his pocket. But more dangerous than money was that the biggest victims of his fraud were those who were already in pain. One of the most heartbreaking cases came to light: a family who had lost their son under suspicious circumstances. This happened in 2003. A 29-year-old man died mysteriously at his home. There was no clear cause. The family was in shock. They suspected the young man's job. He worked in a chemical factory, and they thought everyday toxic chemicals might have caused his death. To find the truth, they searched for an expert, and one name came up: Dr. Gene Morrison. The family called Dr. Gene Morrison. He immediately began listing his fake degrees: MSc, BSc, PhD, and the family was impressed. They thought this was a respected local forensic expert. With great difficulty, they collected £600 and gave it to him as an advance. You might think at least some investigation would have been done. Absolutely not. He did no investigation at all. Morrison's investigation went like this: calling the deceased's friends, phoning his female friends at night to flirt with them, making the male friends wait at the office for hours and then disappearing without meeting them. He performed no scientific tests. He made no He kept pacifying the family by saying the investigation was ongoing. He was just playing a game, pretending to be a fake CSI investigator. For the family, it was very hard to understand. They thought perhaps this was some professional technique, because Morrison presented himself as an experienced forensic scientist and investigator. So people overlooked his strange behavior. They thought he was an expert, and perhaps this was how investigations were done. Morrison's manner was very odd. One day he showed the family a large glass building and said, "This is my forensic lab." Although the lab was fake, the tests were supposedly real. But how? Dr. Gene Morrison was not conducting any tests himself. He was hiring real experts and presenting their work under his own name. He sent the victim's clothes to an actual technologist. The victim's laptop was also given to a professional computer expert for examination. After making the family wait for months, finally Dr. Gene Morrison handed them a 70-page report. But the real game started here. Out of those 70 pages, 69 were filled only with technical terms and complicated scientific data that a common person could never understand. The remaining page contained only incomplete and very vague information. The family kept hoping and waiting for months, but still, they had no idea how their daughter had actually died. But the game didn't end there. He gave the family false hopes, kept them hanging for months, and when he couldn't prove anything, he handed them a bill of £14,000, nearly 14 lakh rupees. When the family realized the truth, they clearly said, "We won't give you a single penny." But here came another twist in the story. After not receiving the family's money, Dr. Gene Morrison filed a court case in November. Yes, you heard it right. A fake investigator who solved nothing was now dragging the family to court. In court, he claimed that he had worked hard and deserved full payment. He said he was a qualified forensic expert, but this was the height of his arrogance and dishonesty. He never even imagined that his truth could come out in court. However, the judge agreed that Dr. Gene Morrison had done some work, but his charges were too high. The demand of £14,000 was greatly reduced, and then in the same year 2004, this fake expert was hired again in another case. This time as a special witness in a rape case. In that case, a condom wrapper was found with fingerprints on it. The defense lawyer called Dr. Gene Morrison to examine the fingerprints. But did he conduct the test himself? Absolutely not. He hired an expert and got the work done for but he presented the report under his own name and sent a bill of £2,000 to the lawyer, 8 times more than the actual cost. This time he didn't stop there. Dr. Gene Morrison was called only to give an expert opinion, but he started imagining himself as a detective. Now he was trying to become a real-life Sherlock Holmes. But what he did next was truly terrifying. He directly called Standway Prison and demanded to speak to the accused in the case. Then he asked the prison officer for some extremely sensitive information: the name and address of the rape victim and other confidential details of the case. The prison officer was shocked. He wondered how any forensic expert could ask for such information. The prison administration immediately realized that something was wrong. Standway Prison decided not to give this fraud any information. But now they were certain that something was seriously suspicious. They immediately called the police. Gene Morrison had been deceiving people for years, calling himself a forensic investigator and private detective. He claimed to have degrees, a master's and a PhD. He had earned £250,000 of public money, appeared in court as an expert witness, gave false statements, and kept proving himself to be an expert. Gradually, he started believing his own lies. He had created a fake world of crime scene investigation around himself. But in 2004, his arrogance became his downfall. Asking for confidential information from the prison became his biggest mistake. Then in January 2005, the police raided Gene Morrison's home and office, and what they found shocked everyone. The police found stacks of crime scene investigation TV show tapes in his office. That was his real research center. He had probably planned to become a fake forensic expert by watching these shows. When the police searched further, they found fake documents and reports scattered everywhere. But some things were extremely strange. A white lab coat that he wore to look like a scientist, as if he conducted real tests. A huge magnifying glass that looked like it belonged to a cartoon detective. His office looked less like a real investigator's lab, and more like a comic book scene. Until now, Dr. Gene Morrison had been fooling everyone, but the police had finally shut down his operation. His website was immediately taken down, and the police began investigating all his old cases. But a new problem now appeared. In 2005, there were no strict laws in Britain for private investigators or forensic experts. It meant anyone could call themselves an expert, and no legal action could be taken against them. This was the reason Gene Morrison had been roaming free for so many years. If the police could prove that his degrees were fake, it would directly count as fraud and giving false testimony in court. So the police began investigating his qualifications in depth, and the truth that came out could make anyone's blood run cold. The police found that Gene Morrison had given expert opinions in more than 700 cases. That meant in 700 cases, someone could have been wrongly convicted because of him. Now the question was, could the police actually punish him, or would he escape again due to legal loophole? Friends, if you are enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like it. Now the police only had to prove that his degrees were fake. When the police interrogated Dr. Gene Morrison, what came out was shocking. The police asked him, "What are your real qualifications?" Gene replied, "I have a PhD, but it's not recognized here." Then the police asked, "What is your PhD in?" Dr. Gene Morrison said, "In criminal psychology, which I got from America." But with every question, his answers kept changing. First he said he got his degree from America. Then he said it's not a degree, it's a PhD. His answers were so confusing that even the police started getting puzzled. During interrogation, Dr. Gene Morrison sometimes gave such strange replies that the police were left stunned. It was almost as if he thought he was Sherlock Holmes himself. When the police asked him about his claims of studying in Germany and the Czech Republic, he again started dodging the questions. By now the police were convinced that Dr. Gene Morrison was a major fraud. But they still needed solid evidence. When the police asked him about studying in Germany and the Czech Republic, the conversation went like this. "Police, did you study in Germany?" Gene, yes, I studied in Germany." Police, which university?" Gene, I don't remember." Police, who taught you? Gene, church people who were my friends. Police, what certificate did you receive? Gene, I'm not sure if it's recognized here or not. Then the police pressed further. Police, which university awarded your degree? Gene, criminal university. Police, and where is this criminal university? Gene, I don't remember. Maybe in California. Police, so you studied in California? Gene, no, I mean I was in Manchester. Police, so where exactly did you study then? Gene, actually, it's a degree I got through life experience. By now he was so nervous that he was getting trapped in his own lies. Sometimes he said he had a degree, then he said it was a PhD, then he said it wasn't recognized, and then he said he didn't have a degree at all. Now the police were 100% sure this man was a complete fraud. Once the police asked him if he could show any copy of his degree, or at least prove that the institutions he mentioned even existed. But Dr. Gene Morrison said, "It's unlikely I'll be able to find them in America and present them to you." A private detective who couldn't even prove his own degree. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? The truth was that Dr. Gene Morrison had simply bought online degree. Now the police launched a full investigation against him. His fake forensic firm was shut down. Still, his lies and frauds didn't stop immediately. The Manchester police had completely tightened their grip on him, but he had not yet been arrested. Manchester, far away in Nottingham, he was still listed as an expert witness. A lawyer based in Nottingham called him to appear as a specialist in a Crown Court case. When Dr. John Morrison accepted the Nottingham job, he already knew that the police were after him. This was yet another interesting and shocking example of his fraudulent nature. He simply could not stop himself. It had become like an addiction to him. He said, "Yes, tell me what your case is." The case in which he was called for expert analysis was related to the legal defense of an accused who was charged with drug dealing. The Nottingham lawyer asked him to examine the scales seized by the police, on which the police expert had claimed there were fingerprints and traces of cocaine belonging to the accused. His job was to challenge that police report. The lawyer hoped that John Morrison, whom they believed to be a qualified specialist, would be able to prove whether those fingerprints belonged to the accused or not. Even though Manchester police were tightening their grip on him and preparing charges, his fake forensic services continued as if nothing had happened. As usual, this time too he decided to hire a real expert for the fingerprint examination. But when it came to analyzing the drug residue, he decided to write the report himself. The report he produced contained serious errors. To begin with, there were countless spelling mistakes. He even misspelled cocaine, leaving out the letter E at the end. In Nottingham, John Morrison scheduled a meeting with Adam Booker, a forensic chemist who had prepared the original report on the scales for the police. When John Morrison arrived for the first time at Booker's office reception, Booker noticed that he was wearing a yellow high-visibility jacket with the words Forensic Investigator written on the back. Booker found it a bit odd because it's rare for professionals to display such titles so boldly, but he thought maybe it was just Morrison's style. When Dr. Morrison entered the lab, he was accompanied by a young woman. This made Booker even more suspicious, because professional experts usually come alone. No forensic expert brings his girlfriend along. The girl was busy texting on her phone the entire time. She kept asking, "How much longer will it take?" Morrison would reply, "Just a little while more." After a few minutes she would ask again, "Will it take much longer?" Morrison told her to be quiet and wait. His focus was less on his work and more on the girl. Dr. John Morrison talked about his degree and experience, but his behavior was completely strange. At one point, Adam Booker noticed him taking a report out of a file. The report contained chromatograms, data from forensic chemical analysis, but Morrison was holding the paper upside down. He was staring at it and nodding as if he was reading it silently. But in truth, he had no idea what it meant. Booker found it strange, but since Dr. Morrison was an expert witness for the defense team, he didn't say much. A few days later, Adam Booker received a call from the police. An officer told him that they were investigating Dr. John Morrison's fraud. Now everything made sense to Booker. The upside-down paper, the strange questions, the odd clothes, and bringing the girl along. All of it now seemed suspicious. Dr. John Morrison was not a real forensic expert. Manchester police had exposed the truth, and he was removed from the case. After 26 years, his fraud was finally caught. Now he was going to face trial. The charges had been framed, and the court date was set. The police now had strong evidence against him. The law had finally caught this fraudster. In September 2006, Dr. John Morrison stood in court again, but this time he wasn't a witness, he was the accused. A reporter said, "I've been reporting on crime for 10 years. I've seen many cases, but what happened in Manchester Crown Court was the strangest of all. It was the most foolish trial I have ever seen." This time, Dr. Morrison was not wearing his high-visibility jacket in court, but he was still trying to impress everyone. When he was called to testify, it seemed as though he was enjoying every second of the attention. He wore half glasses, resting low on his nose, and took a long time reading the documents, as if he wanted all eyes on him. The entire atmosphere of the trial was different, not serious at all. There were random conversations, laughter and jokes. Dr. John Morrison sat behind the defense box, wearing a three-piece suit, looking well-groomed. Small glasses perched on his nose, piles of files in front of him. He kept scribbling or whispering, sometimes to himself, sometimes to others. It looked like earlier he had been pretending to be a forensic expert, and now he was playing the role of an experienced lawyer. He even insisted that everyone address him as Dr. Morrison in court, even though it was a complete lie. The drama didn't stop there. When Dr. John Morrison took the stand to testify, the jury couldn't stop laughing. The entire trial began to feel like a comedy show. Once he suddenly started speaking in an American accent. Everyone was shocked. When asked why he was doing that, he replied, "It's just my habit." But the truth was that he had been living in Manchester for 40 years. He had never even been to America, let alone studied there. The whole trial had turned into a joke. People in the courtroom were astonished, asking themselves, what's wrong with this? It seemed like he was living completely in his own fantasy world. Then came the topic of his degrees. When Dr. Morrison was questioned about his forensic qualifications, the truth started coming out. As questions about blood testing and technical processes increased, he became more confused. Many of his answers made absolutely no sense. Finally, the judge couldn't take it anymore. He interrupted and said, "To be honest, even I don't understand what you're saying." The jury burst into laughter. Now the trial was no longer serious. It was pure absurdity. Then Morrison made up another story. This time he claimed that he had received his forensic training from an expert in the Czech Republic. He said, "I was taught by Mr. Rex." When the court asked him to identify this person, his response was even stranger. Morrison said, "I can't reveal his name publicly, but I can whisper it to you outside in the corridor." The judge immediately replied, "Court doesn't work like that." It was now clear that he was just making things up. When the jury went out to deliberate, John Morrison approached journalist Nicola Dolan and asked, "What do you think? Are you ready to go to jail?" Morrison was shocked. He said, "I haven't even thought about that. Why would I go to jail? God is with me." Dr. Morrison was convinced that he would be acquitted. He said that God had given him signs. One juror fell ill. One lawyer couldn't come because his train was delayed. "These are all signs the verdict will be in my favor," he said. But the truth was very different. Dr. John Morrison had only admitted to 2 charges. However, the jury, who had been laughing throughout his antics, ultimately found him guilty on 20 more counts: perjury, attempting to pervert the course of justice, and fraud. Only the sentencing remained. In March 2007, the judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison. The court declared him a man addicted to lying and capable of deceit without a flicker of guilt. For 26 years, he had deceived the courts as a fake forensic expert. He had given false testimony in over 700 cases, and wasted hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money. But the most shocking part was still to come. John Morrison was not just a fraud. When he was sent to prison, his real and far more horrifying crimes began to surface. Crimes so disturbing that people were shaken to their core. His role as a crime scene investigator, his high-visibility jacket, and his courtroom theatrics, all of it had been a disguise, a mask that hid something terrifying. When people later heard the new allegations against him, they stopped seeing him as a clown. They now saw him as a dangerous criminal. After his 5-year sentence, police discovered evidence that changed everything. Morrison was no ordinary fraudster. He was a cunning predator who had fooled the system and destroyed lives. While he was in prison, 4 young girls came forward and accused Dr. John Morrison of serious sexual abuse. And these weren't just isolated incidents. It was a long, horrifying list of assaults, including the rape of 2 girls who were only 10 and 11 years old. Everyone was horrified. No one could have imagined that this man could fall so low. Dr. John Morrison wasn't just a con man. He was a predator who targeted innocent children. He did everything deliberately. He first befriended the families of the children, often through the church. Then slowly, he gained their trust, only to shatter it in the most horrifying way possible. Morrison would lure these girls with gifts and money, make them feel special, win their trust, and when they resisted, he would turn violent. He would threaten and intimidate them, saying that if they told anyone, he would harm them or their families. This is called grooming. These kinds of predators first lure children with gifts and attention, then use that trust to silence them. They invite the children to spend time with them, and when the child refuses, the same man who once seemed friendly suddenly becomes terrifying. Dr. John Morrison did exactly this. He claimed that everything was consensual, that all the girls were over 16. But the truth was completely different, horrifyingly different. The girls who came forward were between the ages of 8 and 15. Morrison was no longer just accused. There was solid evidence, and the crimes were monstrous. The prosecution stated clearly, This man is a serial sexual offender who specifically targeted underage girls. In December 2009, Dr. John Morrison was found guilty on 11 charges. He was declared a danger to public safety and sentenced to indefinite imprisonment. In the beginning, people thought he was a clown, a man fooling the police, wearing a fake jacket, lying in court. But the 2007 sentence was just the beginning. Once he was in prison, the victims began to come forward, and everyone realized this man wasn't a fraud, he was a predator. Dr. John Morrison was sentenced to a minimum of 7 years and 6 months in prison, but the real sentence would only end when it was proven that he was no longer a threat to society. He was placed on the sex offender register for life. His fake identity had been his armor. He had built false personas as a forensic expert and private detective, gained people's trust, and then used that trust to prey on children. This is not just the story of a con man, it is the story of a psychopathic predator who walked among society disguised as a respectable man. Many laughed at him in court, not realizing that their laughter was his shield. Behind it hid a face that had become a nightmare for children. This entire story serves as a warning that not every strange and amusing face is worthy of trust. Friends, today's true crime story ends here. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and comment to tell us which story you'd like to hear next.